So Ellie, have you got a question for us that you want to kick off with around victims of crime?
Yeah, there's a big one coming in first. So someone's asking, as a victim of a hate crime, what support's available? And I've asked if we can potentially first speak to Gavin, and then if Lisa can update on what's available from the Commissioner's office as well.
Yeah, sure. Hate crime is one of those things. Because I should explain a little bit about what a hate crime is, in that you can be a victim of any sort of crime. So it might be a criminal damage against your property, or it might be a sort of public order offence, or a worst case a violent attack. But if it's motivated by hate, then that is something that the courts can take into account when they come to sentencing. And of course, if offending against you is motivated by hate, then it's highly likely that the perpetrator of that is not just targeting you as a victim of that crime, but perhaps others as well. And because from a policing point of view, we want to intervene as early as we possibly can when we see this sort of behaviour, because the last thing we want to see is for it to escalate and become really serious, or undermine somebody's quality of life on a day-to-day basis, because often hate crimes can be repeated as well. So we have a strong partnership with Stop Hate UK, which allows alternative ways of reporting, and we also have a hate crime lead for the force, and we do specialist training around that. But I know through the Commissioner's office as well, there are also other support services available.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's the thing. So over £3 million from my office last year around victims of crime, and I think the important thing to point out is that covers all victims of crime. So it doesn't matter whether you've been a victim of whether it's domestic abuse or sexual assault, burglary, any kind of crime, of course, including hate crime. The support is there, and those services support anybody who's been a victim. And yeah, so getting in touch with either directly with Surrey Police or with the office, and we can always help point you in the right direction. Thank you for that, Gavin. And just on that, it's been really reassuring to see that our victim and witness care unit providing sort of such strong sort of care and support to to all victims across the county. And I know something that's very much sort of central to the unit and important for the unit. Given court backlogs though, and the increased demand that the delay places on those staff, and not something, as we know, that is not in our control, are we confident that the unit has the resource in order to be able to manage this?
We would always love more resource in victim and witness care. We have put some additional investment in for this year as we go through the recovery, and I guess the first thing I'd like to do is pay tribute really to all of the colleagues that work in that unit, and the volunteers that we have that come in and support us doing victim and witness care too, because of course the pandemic has been an extraordinary strain on all sorts of services, hasn't it? But we know particularly on how the whole criminal justice system has been able to function smoothly, and there's lots still to recover in how that works, to get people court dates, to get cases before the court. We're already seeing signs of improvement with court listings, but there are still long delays and often last minute changes with listings and so on as well. So those victim and witness care officers work extraordinarily hard to try and keep people up to date and informed where they've got particular needs. So for example, in hate crime, to be able to refer on to the additional support agencies if it's needed too. So we have put some extra staff in there. We'd always like more. And of course, there are always, if this is something that you would like to come and support your local community on, and give support to those victims and survivors of crime as they approach what can sometimes be difficult court proceedings, then please do get in touch, because there's some great volunteering opportunities there too, which can make a real difference to helping witnesses, families, victims through those difficult months.
Yeah, and incredibly rewarding work as well.
Indeed.
For people. Ellie, you got more questions?
We've got more questions. This one sort of links to the previous question, but is more broad to than the specific victim. So someone in Elmbridge has asked, why are local residents not informed that they have an offender living amongst them when the offender has been subject to a community order and holds a position of responsibility?
Yeah, sure. So obviously when cases go before the court, if they're done in an open court, as of course the vast majority of them are, and convictions ensue, then that's in the public domain anyway. And often local media outlets will cover that. And if there are certain cases that are particularly high profile, have had particular public interest around them, then we often do proactive media releases to communicate those results, so that you can see the work that policing and other agencies have been doing to keep the county safe, and of course to warn you about some of those offending behaviours, and on occasions the actual perpetrator themselves. So there's that level of awareness. That of course is not done routinely for every offence, but it's done for those where we make a judgment it's necessary in the interests of ongoing public safety. Of course, there are some disclosure schemes where we anybody can make requests under those schemes. Particularly, we've been talking, for example, about perpetrators of domestic abuse. And there's another scheme in relation to risks to children and young people as well. Those sorts of disclosures are done very carefully in conjunction with liaison officers within the local authority to make sure that the information that gets to those individuals that need it in order to be able to help manage the risk. So for those sort of cases, it would not necessarily be a broader community awareness, because often that can sometimes lead to additional tensions or additional policing problems or expose other risks, but we will do those disclosures where the circumstances are suitable to those people that need to know in order to help the individuals involved manage those risks.
Okay, that's really reassuring. Thank you, Bevan. Ellie, you've got some more.
I do. This was actually touched on earlier, and I know, Nev, specifically, you're doing quite a lot of work in this area. Neil from Reigate in Banstead wants to know, what's the police stance in Surrey in being more proactive in updating us on what's being done following up from a crime being committed?
So in relation to victims of crime in particular, one of the things we're pushing very hard is to make sure that if you are a victim of crime, you get timely and regular updates. We know that's one of the key areas that leads to greater satisfaction. So that's something we're working really hard on. And actually, not every force, you might be surprised to know, actually measures how satisfied victims are. We've ensured that we've kept doing that, and in fact we have a better way of doing that now. We've improved the data that we get so that we can identify at what point the victim is satisfied, and if they're not, at what point that happens, so we can pin it right down to teams or individual officers and staff. And that's really helping us understand how good, or at times not so good as we like, our performance is, because we believe that that's really important. In terms of updating the public more generally, we have a number of ways of doing that. Our communications team here have won awards for some of the innovative ways that they keep the public informed about the results of crimes and also crime patterns that are happening. But what I'd say is, if there are ways that you think that we should be doing it, we're missing a trick, because I often hear that we don't shout loudly enough about a lot of the good work we do, then please do tell us. A bit like the example we were giving earlier on about the gentleman who contacted us about us using dash cam footage. If you've got some really good ideas about how we can communicate with you and keep you informed, I'd love to hear them.
Great, thanks very much, Nev. It is your last chance to get a question in, if you have one. But Ellie, I think we've got a bit of time for a couple more.
Yeah, we've got quite a lot coming in. So just a quick reminder to everybody at home, if we don't get to your question, they will be taken and answered offline after the meeting, particularly if we're on a different topic that wasn't sort of focused on today. The next one comes in from Alex on Facebook. Does Surrey Police recognise misogyny as a motivation for sex-based crimes? She's noticed it's been debated in Parliament, so she's interested to know what the approach is from Surrey.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, it's been a big topic of national debate about whether misogyny should be recorded as a hate crime. So that's not currently how it is in legislation, but I know that the Law Commission and the Home Office were looking at this, and in policing terms, we follow the will of Parliament and national guidelines that are issued. There are some police force areas that have experimented with some recording around it, with the support of their sort of local charities and agencies that have described how that in those areas has helped send a really strong message particularly to women in the community in the area about how seriously police do take these reports. So at the moment, that's not our stance in Surrey. We sort of follow the national guidelines, but that's not to say that we don't take any sort of reports of hate extremely seriously. Now, there's a fine balance to take here, and Her Majesty's Chief Inspectorate of Constabulary has sort of reiterated the report, the annual report of his predecessor, where they talked about policing not being the thought police. So there's a clear line when sort of offending behaviour is crossed and it becomes a sort of breach of the law, as it were, and that's where we as policing have a responsibility to intervene. However, of course, in policing we want to spot early opportunities, and we know in some very serious offending behaviour that often escalates to levels of extreme violence. Sometimes those individuals, when we look back, had hate-filled social media profiles, were known in their local community for sort of hate speech, as it were, that didn't yet cross that line into a transgression of the law. So it's still important in policing for us to know about these things and be able to put that information together with other intelligence and other community concerns, so that we hopefully don't miss opportunities when high-risk offenders can cross that line from speech into sometimes some quite violent activity. So it is a difficult balance for policing to strike, and I hope we strike the right one in Surrey. But of course, always interested in your views if you think we're the wrong side of the line. And of course, we know different people have different views and opinions on this too. So we do try and get the balance right.
Yeah, and it's a difficult one. The other one that comes to mind is sort of incel, some of the quite awful incel ideology that we've seen, unfortunately, coming across from America, and we know there was already at least one tragic case in the UK. So it's good to know that keeping a close eye on that. Ellie.
Yeah, if we can squeeze in 2 more, that would be lovely.
We can squeeze in 2 more.
It's a really interesting topic because the questions are so varied. The next one, I don't know who wants to take this one. Robert on Facebook asks, what's being done about the shortfall in back office staff within the criminal justice unit who process the summons, tickets and collision reports?
Okay, that's quite a detail. Was it from Robert?
It was from Robert.
Thank you, Robert. It's quite a detailed question. That it's not one that I know the answer to this evening, but more than happy to take that away and get that information to you. Although one thing that we mentioned the case earlier on about the sort of reporting using dash cams and helmet cams and so on, and I know that Nev, when we looked at that, the team have come back to us to talk about the resourcing that might be required for that. And indeed, we've started some dialogue with our road safety partnership as well as to how we may be able to resource that differently too. So more than happy to pick that up and take it away and have a look. And if Robert's got a bit more detail about an experience that's led to that question, then please do get in touch privately as well.
Great. Wonderful. And one more we'll squeeze in, and actually this is something that comes up when we're out and about quite a lot, so I think it's a really helpful opportunity to maybe address the perception. Jonathan from Woking says, every time I go to the shopping centre in Woking, there's at least 15 police cars parked up. Why are these vehicles not out patrolling?
Yeah, sure. And I know we've seen a similar question, I think, online too, about the officers in Esher as well at Elmbridge. I think it's important to point out that the council officers are effectively our police stations now. So we're co-located with the local authority in a number of locations across the county. And because it's our police station, you're going to see police cars there. We have shift changeovers. We were talking earlier about the response times and having the sort of vehicle fleet necessary to do that. And there are times when there'll be significant numbers of vehicles parked at these places whilst we do that. The other thing I should say though is that we're always alive to try and get the best value for money out of the tax contributions that you give us. That vehicle telematics is one thing that we look closely at. We are going to have to make savings as Surrey Police over the coming years, some quite significant savings, and I know that one of the things on our list to look really carefully at is the size of our vehicle fleet, and to make sure that vehicle fleet is the right sort of mix of vehicles that we need as well. So for example, across Surrey and Sussex, we introduced 60 electric vehicles in recent years, and we've been evaluating the sort of duties that they're really effective for. We've trialled hydrogen and so on as well. yeah, that's why they're police stations. But rest assured, we do look that we're spending money wisely.
Yeah.
It's probably just worth adding, the chief mentioned about telematics. So we are shrinking the size of our vehicle fleet, and what we found is where vehicles aren't doing enough miles, actually we're removing them from the fleet altogether, and we're going to keep doing that. So it's been a really useful tool in making sure that every vehicle provides value for money. So although you might see a number of vehicles parked up at certain times, what I can assure you is those vehicles are being used and used regularly, and you know, to make us ensure that we're as efficient as possible. And interestingly, actually, we removed some vehicles that some of our police community support officers were using in one part of the county, and they've been used more during the pandemic. There are obviously safety issues with using a vehicle. We've removed those, and actually it's encouraging those officers do a lot more foot patrol. There's been some really good feedback around that. So all the time we're trying to make sure that, one, we don't have too many vehicles, and two, we're getting best use out of them.
That's great. Thank you both. And Woking is my nearest sort of big town, and I think I know the car park. I think it's on Victoria Way that Jonathan's talking about. I have to say, I always feel incredibly safe parking my car there. And if I'm on my own and it's after dark, it's somewhere I always feel very safe walking. So yes, I don't think it's a bad thing at all. That is all of the questions, but I am going to ask Gavin. We've got a really busy summer coming up. We've got the Jubilee weekend. We've got the Epsom Derby happening. Very exciting, coming up in Surrey on the Jubilee weekend. We've got a great summer of football, fingers crossed, coming up. I just wonder if there's anything that you want to say to the public, to our residents, about sort of having a safe summer, and anything that you want them to keep an eye out for, make sure.
Yeah, sure. I mean, let's, you know, hope post-pandemic that this summer is going to be a much more enjoyable one than we've had in recent years. And of course, the Jubilee celebrations is just fantastic, isn't it? I mean, with the Epsom Derby, I'm really hoping that Her Majesty does make it to the Epsom Derby. We saw that she made the horse show over the weekend, and I'm hoping that we do see in Surrey as part of those Jubilee celebrations. I know there'll be lots of street parties going on and great community gatherings, and I would ask really just one simple thing, and that's to look after each other and be really great neighbours. Let's pull together during these summer celebrations, as we did during that very early wave of the pandemic, where we saw actually really exceptional levels of public space sort of safety, people really being thoughtful to each other. If we can do that, then it would be a big help for policing, because of course we have lots of additional resource demands for all of these events. So if you can help look after each other, then that I know that the teams would really appreciate that.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I think that's a fantastic note to end on, which is to look after each other. I'll be out and about throughout the Jubilee weekend, attending street parties and festivals throughout the county, and I know that others and colleagues will be as well. So thank you to Deputy Chief Constable Nev Kemp, Chief Constable Gavin Stevens, my Deputy Ellie Vasey-Thompson, from myself, Lisa Townsend, your Police and Crime Commissioner. Let's end it on that. Look after each other and keep safe. Thank you for watching.